Welcome to the Your Brilliant Difference podcast. This is Finka Yerkovic, and I'm so excited that you are here with me today because I've got a super brilliant and special guest, Carina Diamond. Carina, say hello.
Hello, Finca. Good to be
Hi,
here.
great to have you here. So, let me give you a little bit of background on Carina and what we're going to be talking about today. So, we're going to talk about the profound need for leadership today, especially with the turbulent and complex and ambiguous times that we are living in. And we're going to have some time talking about that with Carina Diamond. Now, Carina Diamond is the founder and CEO of Stella Secunda. She is a financial services veteran, so we go way back as well. Our connection as well, with decades of experience founding, building, and selling businesses. She's a champion of women and underserved individuals working in the financial services. She's also a mentor, a role model to numerous college students, and founded a leadership program for graduate student women. She is currently consulting in the trade on fintech succession and growth strategies. Carina, welcome.
Thank you so much.
So I'm excited for our conversation. Do you want to give us a little bit of background around the work that you're doing and how do you help people through Stella Secunda today?
So, Stella Secunda was founded a year ago and has definitely been a process. So sometimes you have an idea in your mind of where you're going to be and you end up completely somewhere else based on what the need is. And that would be a good example of that. So been doing a couple things. One is consulting in the fintech space, working on a financial wellness app for a large financial institution. So, which is probably the coolest thing I've ever thought I would be doing. So, working with a lot of young talent and very cutting edge technology, and I would probably do it for free because it's just so cool, and I'm learning so much. I've also been leading a diversity initiative for a consortium of universities across the country to try to get more underrepresented people into financial services. So that's also been an interesting journey. And then finally, I've been just doing some various speaking and coaching for different organizations.
Fantastic, fantastic. So you caught my attention. I can't seem to let it go when you said the impetus of starting something isn't always where you end up. Can you tell us a little bit about what maybe the originating idea, and then what did you notice happened to get you to where you are today?
I think what happened has to do with the original topic, which is leadership. So, we all think that, oh, we're good at something. Like, for example, I'm good at advising clients and I'm good at advising teams. And then suddenly someone else says, oh, but you'd be great at this. Like in my case, it was helping with a fintech project or helping with succession. So like I've spent my whole career building teams and then exiting situations and successfully transitioning, projects, resources, clients to those teams. And I guess I never really realized that that is somewhat unique because people tend to kind of hold on to things or afraid to let go. I was someone who was never afraid of being around people smarter than me or people that had other talents maybe that I didn't. I was welcome that and was excited to do something new because I need the stimulation. But it is very interesting when an outsider looks at you and goes, "Oh, you'd be really good at board work," which is something I'm also pursuing right now. And I said, "Yes, actually, I do have a lot of background in that, and it's interesting. I'm getting increasing inquiries about that, which I had not really considered previously."
Yeah. It sounds also when I think about your brilliant difference, and maybe we'll even tap into there. So you've talked a little bit about the things that you've been good at, but there's also this part where there are things that we know we are good at, and that we have been recognized or succeeded and have achieved successes in those areas. So those are the easy ones. What was it like when you're hearing this feedback? Oh, you'd be really great in this area or with board work. What was your initial reaction? And it sounds like you're the type of person who's really ready to dive in. In the event that you had some resistance, how did you navigate it, or what would you recommend if someone's like, "Oh, I don't know about that." Like or imposter syndrome shows up. I don't think I'm cut out for that. Like, did you have any of that show up for you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, change is challenging. I'm someone who has always embraced change because I feel like, gosh, if you can't deal with it, you need to live on another planet because of technology, things are only changing faster and faster. And I think that there is an element of security in, hey, I got this award, or I had this big job, or I got this recognition, and you can kind of stay in that space. But I think if you dare to be curious and look around the corner, which is something I try very hard to do, you realize that you actually may have a skill set that is completely something different. And if you're open to possibilities, I'm a very curious person. If you're open to possibilities, you may realize that, gosh, just because I am good at this doesn't mean it's what I should be doing now. And that's hard to get out of that comfort zone. But if you can do it, it's extremely freeing.
Yeah. It makes me think of, have you ever come across Gay Hendricks' work? It's a book, a body work called The Big Leap. And he talks about these four quadrants. The first one being the zone of incompetence. So stuff that we're not good at, and we sometimes do or have to do that we don't want to do. There's the zone of competence, the things that we are good at and we want to do that we just get done. The zone of excellence, which I think is that part that you're talking about, that thing that we get recognized, we achieve, and we're successful at, and we are known for. And then the final one he calls is the zone of genius, and that's that like that's that it, it's the one we're probably scared to death exploring, but it's also maybe one that we're not so aware of. Have you noticed that, for you, and I think about brilliant difference as well. Like I think of so often our brilliant difference can get capped at what he calls our zone of excellence, that it feels like it's we're in this stride, we're doing things, we're succeeding, we're making money, we're having an impact. But there is this other thing that you do, and have you cracked the nut on that, or what's helping you crack the nut on what is that zone of genius or brilliance that you're noticing about yourself?
Well, okay, so now I need to pay you to be on this because I'm on this podcast because you just kind of clarified something for me. So thank you for that. Obviously, you're very astute at what you do, but that's exactly what was happening. I mean, I
Mm,
kept getting, awards and accolades and promotions
mhm.
and, all this wonderful stuff that I'm very grateful for. And it was comfortable, but I just always felt that I've got something more inside me. I couldn't articulate it maybe, but I just had this feeling that I can do more, I can do something different. And sometimes you have to kind of sometimes there has to be a disruption for that to happen. So I made a very difficult decision about a year ago and sold my business back to the company I was working with and transitioned clients to my really outstanding team and walked away. And it was quite frankly somewhat terrifying. And the result has been I have met more interesting people in the last year than I probably did in the prior 10 years. People that think differently, but people that see me differently, which
Mm,
that was also weird. Like, wait a minute, I'm good at this, but you're thinking, what is this over here? So I don't have it all figured out, but I have a number of things I'm considering right now in developing, and it's
yeah.
actually a very exciting time.
One of the things I think you have figured out, and I'm just getting goosebumps just thinking about it, is, and this is the hardest part, um, that is making the decision. Like that part is like, and navigating that transition from who you are to who you can become, and selling the business. And I'm sure you had back and forth sort of going, should I, shouldn't I, should I, shouldn't I? And then what has helped you over the last year continue? Because I'm just in awe. And, I think there's this place of, uh, hmm, we don't know what's on the other side once we step over and you open that door. But what I'm seeing from you is that there's this beautiful network and a new vision of who you are and what you're able to do based on the context that you've now leaped yourself into.
It's really been fascinating and terrifying all at the same time.
It's
But
perfect.
people,
It's
it really,
perfect. It's
but,
perfect.
but people have come out of the woodwork. I got a call from a former CEO that I had worked with out of the blue who just said, "Hey, could you come and talk to my top producers at my insurance company? Because you'd be perfect talking about succession planning and talent development and whatnot." And I was like, "Sure, I can do that." Never thought about it, and that sort of resulted in some more consulting in that area. Have had lots of conversations about different, starting another business. I've been asked to consult, to be like a CFO for hire, which I'm not a CFO, by the way, but I run business. I'm like, I'm not a CFO. Oh, but you could be one for hire. I'm like, but I'm not a CFO. And then, I'm talking to these people and they're like, you have all the skills because you've
Yeah.
run businesses. So it's just, it's sort of like being confident enough to be vulnerable and
Hmm.
have all of your awards, your degrees, your designations stripped away, and what is really your essence. And I think that's really where I have been and where I still am right now. And what's been fascinating is I've talked to several dozen businesses about joining them. And at least as of right now, my conclusion is I'm probably going to do something next on my own. Because I know I'm seeing things differently than they are. And for better or for worse, I think it's going to make me happier.
Yeah. I will reckon to say that it will be for better. I want to also recapture that golden nugget you said that when you strip away all the degrees and the accolades and all the awards, who are you at your essence? That's in quotations, Carina Diamond. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. It is because once all that's gone, that's the striving and driving and the way the external environment, whether we're in a financial services world or in a consumer goods product company or we're running a startup, the environment can inform who we see ourselves being by the titles we have. And what you're saying is, let's take away the titles, let's take away the labels. Who are you at in your essence? And then from there, how do you take that curiosity and that wonder and start a new adventure?
Right. And also realizing what's going to make you happy. I
Mm,
think that's also a big part of it. I look around and I see a lot of people that are in their 50s or 60s and they've retired or left a business or sold for sometimes, reasons that were out of their control. Sometimes it was in their control. But I think the happiest people are the ones that can really find out what does make them happy. And I'm working on that.
yep. Yep. There was another book that I came across. It's called From Strength to Strength, and it talks about our first half of our careers. I think it's by Arthur Brooks, if I'm not mistaken. So it will have to correct me if it isn't. But he talks about like the first half of our life is like what we've been up until now,
Hmm.
and kind of the proving, the driving, the ambition, and applying. And it's probably what you're noticing also as you're working on that financial wellness app. And maybe we'll talk about the generational talent and how each generation has a certain value that they're bringing to the table. And then there's like the second half of our career where now we've got all this wisdom, like you've got all this experience, this wisdom, this knowledge. And all of a sudden it's about repurposing it. And it's like we're paying it back. So we're going from our strengths to like our other strengths, the strengths that now we've built on these strengths. And we get to pay it back forward, which I think is really cool. Now, there was a moment for you when you realized that the world and how you saw the world, and I think the point of view that we hold in our leadership is important. And this profound shift you had from you saw the world from a place of abundance, but what you were noticing that the people or the environment you were in were seeing it from a place of fear or scarcity. You want to talk a little bit more about what that was and what happened?
I think I think it comes down to I mean, somewhat of it is your personality and sort of your outlook on life. But I've always been looking around the corner, and at times, I've had people that have just said, "Oh, but you said this last month, and now you're saying this, and I have a problem with that." And I said, "You know what? Get used to it because that's my job is to be looking ahead." But that can be frightening to some people. That can be very uncomfortable. It can seem inconsistent if you have a more of a closed mindset. And of course, you don't want to be a leader and be randomly changing things because that's not cool, obviously. But I think if you look at, for example, financial services, there are different fee models. There are different ways to manage assets. there are different ways to give advice. And, some people are very caught up in, oh, I'm managing these assets and this is what's the most important thing to everyone. And, I'm there saying, probably not. Probably what is really making you unique is maybe how you deliver that information, or maybe it's the advice that you're giving, but it's not something that's really becoming commoditized. And so, but there's a lot of people that are still thinking that that's what makes them special.
Yeah.
And the world is changing so fast. I was at a seminar about the future, and the speaker said, things will never change as slowly as they are today. And I thought he misspoke, but he was right, because it's like this. It's just this exponential thing. And for me, being on now working on a very young, with a very young team that's very diverse, and they respect me because I have more experience and more technical knowledge than they do. But I'm just one of many people on a team. And I absolutely am learning as much from them as they are, I would say, from me.
So, on that topic, what are you noticing about generation talent, and why is it important?
I think the biggest thing is staying curious and not being threatened. So
Mm,
if you're not confident in who you are, you're going to have a really hard time, and it's
yeah.
only going to get worse. And so for me, it started with my mindset, but it was little things. And again, I don't think there are really little things, but some of it might seem like little things. Um, this will sound weird, but I started wearing tennis shoes or sneakers with dresses, with suits, with pants, partly because just I got tired of having sore feet, but it also just sort of fit where I am today. And it wasn't like, oh, I'm so cool, but it was just, this is where I am today. I threw out so many fancy shoes. It was even funny, but I feel different now when I show up, and I just feel more grounded. So maybe I am more grounded because I'm just closer to the ground, closer to the earth.
Literally.
Literally, I'm also 6 feet tall, so I don't need to be up in the air any more than I am. But it was, for me, that was one thing. And it also, that affects how, when you show up and you're
Mhm.
dressed professionally, but maybe with a little of a casual flair, that affects how people see you as well. So you have to also think about, how do you show up? How do you look? What's your dress? What's your body language? I mean, it's all of these things that are really connected.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I too notice. I don't know. I think it's also been in the last year or so. Like, there was a shift in our, I'm going to say even wardrobe, like just kind of what you put on, what you wear, kind of creates a presence of the energy you put out there, but also how you feel. I love what you said also about the fact that in today's world, because we've got diverse talent, we've got such uncertainty and change happening, as leaders, that can put us at unease, because how do we, there's that needing to control, needing to direct, needing to have a understanding on a situation so you could lead a team. But when there are all these variables going on, you kind of, that's when our ego can get the best of us, and our lack of confidence starts to fuel itself and start manifesting in ways that we don't want it to show up. What have you noticed, like in your experience? What have you noticed either from leaders, like when they're not confident in themselves, how are they showing up with their team? Or I'll say better yet, is there a moment in your career where you learned that lesson the hard way? Like, was there a moment where you're like, I can see how my own insecurities are influencing the team, I better change and shift that? Or have you noticed it in the organizations and the teams that you've been part of?
Well, there's a lot to unpack in those questions. I'll try to give you
Yeah.
some, some good examples of that. But I think I always start with myself, because I could write a book on things I wish I had done differently. But I always say, when I get really old, I'm going to be really smart, because I try to remember all the many lessons I've learned. But I'm a driver. I can be very focused. I can be very intense, and I think a lot of leaders have those kind of characteristics. And I've definitely noticed, particularly with working with multiple generations, that I try to slow down. I really, really try to speak less. I try to ask a lot of questions, and I'll ask a lot of follow-up questions. And one of the biggest things is that I've gotten much more comfortable with silence.
Mm,
Like asking a question, I get an answer, and I just say, "Well, what else?" And it's been astonishing what comes out. And then they say something, and I just say, oh, "Okay, what else?" And the next thing you know, the problem has been solved, or a new idea has come out, and everybody feels much more engaged. I think in the past I was much more directive because I'm thinking, I know what to do, and can't you just do this?
hmm
And you know what? I've learned sometimes easily and sometimes the hard way that there's lots of ways to do it. And it's going to be way more effective if I can close my mouth more often.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. I hear you. Um, when you're thinking, if you're thinking, and you think about maybe the team that you're working with today in the various organizations or even in the past, talent in organization, let's say I'm someone who is at that mid-level management or just kind of identified as a high potential. I'd love for you to kind of give us, what advice or counsel would you give to leaders who are noticing this talent in the organization? Like, what are some of the things they can be doing to help cultivate that talent and retain them? That would be one. And then the side perspective is as an employee. So if I'm that person who wants to, has the ambition, has the goals, has the drive, not even just the desire to do more and have more of an impact, what can I do as an employee? So I'd love for that leadership perspective. So what can leaders do to cultivate better their talent so they can optimize and get the brilliant differences of their talent working with them and for them? And then as an employee, what can an employee do?
I think the first thing with leaders is authenticity, because if you're not authentic, people can smell
Mm.
that a mile away. And putting your ego aside, I was in some restaurant and I saw this thing that said, "Your ego is not your amigo," and I
Oh,
stuck
I
in my
love
mind.
that.
Because it's really ego subordination, is another way to call it that. And you have to make it all about your people. And especially in today's society when everything is, we're messaging, we're texting, we're in teams, we're not even in front of each other so much face
Mhm.
to face anymore. Um, Having that authentic connection, listening, caring, asking questions, supporting, giving guidance when it's being asked, offering resources. These may sound like simple things, but I'm shocked at how often they're not there. I met
Mhm.
with a firm recently with two principals in their late 50s, and they really want to bring in some young people. Can I help them? Well, sure, let's talk about it. And after I described, how I could help them, and then I started talking about what I needed them to do, they kind of looked at each other and they said, "Oh, we don't have any time to be mentoring. Can't you do that?" And I said, "Well, I can help with some of this, but this is your business, not my business. And you need to be the ones that are taking some responsibility." And they just said, "We don't want to really do that." Again, they said, "Can't you do that?" And I said, "I don't think I can really help you. I don't think this is
Yeah.
going to be a good fit." So everybody, no matter what level of leadership you're in, you have the ability to connect and teach and mentor and advocate people. And even if you don't think it's your job, it is your job because it
Yeah.
takes a village to lead. In terms of the second part of your question, which I find very interesting. So let's say you're the mentee or you're the younger or mid-level person. It's very, very interesting how younger people think about being mentored. The biggest advice I would give would be number one, be grateful. I've actually had people say to me, "Oh, I didn't know I was supposed to say thank you. People have always helped me because I'm young and pretty and wonderful." Well, that could be a turnoff. So don't forget the grace notes, like thank you notes, genuinely saying thank you, seeing if there's a way you can help them. Because upward mentoring, upward leadership is something that pardon me, I'm really, really super interested in. And I think that that's something that is really the next phase of where we're going to see leadership go. And then I think the last thing would be realize that you can learn from lots of different people. So it might not just be your boss or, their boss or someone else in your field. There's always, always, always opportunities to learn something about how people treat other people, how people learn from other people. And if you have a beginner's mindset, like if you go in thinking, I know everything versus I'm a beginner, I know nothing, or I'm just an open slate, if you have the latter, you're going to grow and flourish and thrive, and people are going to want to help you.
Yeah. So good. Such good advice. I think back to my early days. I wish you were around to tell me that. you know, so much. I remember not being happy or content with where I was and ready to go off to the next thing and ready to go off to the next thing. And there's sometimes this, and I don't know, even for our listeners as they're listening, like if there's this sense of, well, I deserve this thing, or I've worked so hard, like, why aren't they yet promoting me or picking me? Um, I learned this the lesson the hard way, and I think your message around being grateful is so poignant because if in that moment I had said, just be grateful where you are and for this opportunity, I think the energy I brought to my managers and how they perceived me would have been shifted differently. Like eventually, you the promoted, but there's like this like I always feel like my knickers get into a knot. Like I'm so wound up about the next thing. I also notice it with my clients too these days that they're I support companies and leadership development programs, and they're ready like the whole point of being in the leadership development program so they can get the next promotion, the next job, and I love, I'm going to use this, use gratitude as a way to center yourself in being present with where you are right now. So you make the most of this moment. Um, you've got this, I'll say this theme or idea that you think about saying that there are no small things. What does that mean to you?
I worked with a coach years ago, and she always said, Karina, there are no small things. And I didn't really know what she meant. Like, I thought it meant just like, oh, do I have two buttons or one button open, or did I shine my shoes today? Or, and those are, by the way, things that are small things that are not small things, because people definitely notice how you show up. But I think there are no small things has to do with how you talk to people. And what is, and if you're in any kind of a customer or client setting, which by the way we all are, because everybody has a customer or a client, whether you are in sales or not, or whether you think you are in sales or not, because everybody's in sales in some way, is what does that experience look like? And I had a experience that I've talked about a couple times where I had a candy bowl in my office with mints in it, and those like pink starlight mints, the hard wrapped candies. And at the end of the meeting, the client said to me, oh, Karina, I don't know if you remember, my family's in the candy business. And I'm thinking she's mad that we didn't order the candy from her. That's my assumption. Totally wrong. She picked up the candy and she said, I hate these mints. And I'm like, I'm dumbfounded. I'm like, how do you hate them? What are you talking about? And she goes, this is the cheapest candy in the world. And I thought, wow, is that what I want to be known for?
Mm-hmm.
Nope. Or when you give a pen out to a client, is it the cheapest pen you could get, but it has your name on it? Or is it something quality? Maybe you only give out one instead of 10, but it's
Yep.
something that's going to be lasting. I spoke to a group of students the other night at the University of Akron, and we were talking about how do you dress. And one of the young men had a belt on that clearly had been a hand-me-down from maybe a more heavy father or maybe a thrift store, and it had all those like lines in the leather from having been adjusted. And I said,
Mm-hmm.
"Your belt says that you gained weight and then lost weight and then gained weight and then lost." And he looked at me like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Please buy a belt." Because it's just something that maybe it's just me and my OCD, but how you present yourself. You don't have to be in expensive clothing, but it should fit you properly.
Yeah.
That is what people will notice. People will notice how you talk to your own staff. Or when I was selling my business, I noticed or when I've done M&A with other firms, I've noticed that some people bring their whole staff and some people come alone. And there could be good reasons, by the way, for coming
Hmm.
alone. But eventually I would want to meet their staff because it's like, this is the culture. And if it's a big secret from the staff and they don't want anybody to know that, that's going to tell me something. Might seem like a small thing, but that's telling me something very, very loud.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. I love that because it gets us to focus. Like it's the small things that make the whole big thing. And like, who would have thought, and we'll go back to your candy jar example, who would have thought that that jar of candies would have a visceral impact on a client in your office? Like there was like, I hate that candy. Like there was just this visceral impact. And you're so right. Like about anything that we do, whether I think about all the cheap pens I've gotten and where they've ended up, like they're not around, but I do have a couple of really nice ones, and they're heavy, and I still carry them around. They're still pens that I
Mhm.
take with me. But it is those small things, and I think how we pay attention to those small details inform what the bigger picture looks like for our business and our leadership.
Right. I mean, it's also even things like what do you read and what media
Mm,
do you consume and then that also leads to how interesting are you? You know, are you just reading what everyone else is reading? Or I personally every year I add and I subtract. So I look at my reading list and I take something off and then I add something new. And it's often something completely not in my field. Like I've been reading more technology related magazines and, you know, online things, which, you know, I'm very uncomfortable with, by the way, because I feel like I don't really understand a lot of it. But the more I've done it, you know, it may just seem like a small thing. I made this small change to what I was reading over breakfast, but it made me more interesting and it made me
hmm.
certainly feel a little bit more aware of what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. I think that's again a testament to what you talked about earlier, the need for us to adapt and change. Like that is something that e- especially today because of how fast and how much is coming at us and the pace of the world. I can't even remember the statistic, but it was something crazy that like, we will see the amount of change in a day you will see, you wouldn't have seen in years in the past. Like there's just so much coming. As we come to a close here, and we're talking about change, we talked about your brilliant difference, we talked about leadership, and those small things. What is there a piece of advice that you would give leaders today on where to prioritize their time, their energy, or their effort? What would be that advice that you'd want to kind of pay forward?
You know, leaders today, that there's so much information coming in and they have to be very discerning and
Hmm.
filter out, you know, what's important and what's not. I would encourage leaders though to expand their information sources. So just because you always talk to
Mm,
these three people to get your information, or you go to these three departments, or you read these three magazines, you know, try to expand that, because you've got to dare to be curious. It does threaten people, and it can feel kind of scary sometimes. But if you're not curious and you're not changing your field of view pretty regularly, I think you're going to miss a lot of things that
yeah.
could cause stumbling blocks.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think you also gave them a way forward. If we are resistant to change or hesitating or afraid in some way, or feeling anxious about it, turning that curious lens on it, like be curious about it. Like, I wonder what I might learn here. I wonder what's behind this door that you have no idea. I want to also just capture one more thing. I think one of the things that you said earlier today was, again, really hit home for me. So I really appreciated it, was that sense of who are you once everything is stripped away, and what is that essence, and then how does that essence show up in your leadership? And that was a lasting golden nugget you left me with, Karina, so I appreciate you for that. So thank you. If people want to connect with you or learn more about your work, is where could they find you? And again, we'll include all this in the show notes, but for those of you listening in and are not at your computers right now, where do you want to direct them, Karina?
Sure, it's Carina at stellasecunda.com. And Stella Secunda is Latin for next star.
I love it. Fabulous. So the next star is you. Keep shining that brilliant difference. Carina Diamond, thank you so much for being here with us and sharing your wisdom on how they can show up more profound and more impactful in their leadership.
Thanks, Finka.
Thank you.